Lot of questions on generating a pet. So I thought today we could generate a monster. So I want to make an app that says make a monster in a button. And when you click a button, it'll go ahead and make a monster. And then we'll display the monsters down here eventually. Yeah. From there, we'll do other things like maybe deleting a monster or updating a monster. But a monster is obviously going to be very similar to a pet. So hopefully it'll solve some of the questions you guys had yesterday and today. And today, I think we're going to actually make a component separate from app. So app is our main component, right? But if we have a complex application or even a medium application, we're not going to write all our code in app because it would be like 1,000 lines of code, right? It'd be really hard to manage. So what we can do is write our code in different files, different components, and then call them from app. So I actually want to create a new component called monsters. So I'm going to create a new folder called components and a new file called monsters.jsx. So if we're making a React component, it has to end in .jsx. I think actually it could be .js too, but use .jsx. It's VS Code will recognize it. It's just a nicer experience. So how do I make a new React component called monsters that returns the word monsters in a div? So how can I do that? How can I get started with that? Any ideas?
First thing you could do is import React.
You don't need to in the newest version of React. It'll do it for you automatically. But it also doesn't hurt, so.
Then you could do an export default function, monsters, parentheses, and then curly braces.
We need to name it, right? What's a good name?
Monsters.
Yeah. And what does a React component have to return to be considered a React component?
An HTML element.
Yeah, it looks like HTML, but it's actually JSX. So I'll say monsters here. So now remember, this is a module, right? So this code has no idea about anything else in the world. It only knows about something if it imports it and if that thing is exported. So here we're saying anyone who wants this function can use it because I've exported it. And now I want to use it in app.jsx. So I want to use monsters. How can I use monsters and invoke it so it shows up with the word monsters?
Import?
Yeah, although I love to be lazy and I encourage you guys to be and use auto import. So if we successfully already exported it, we can just start calling this as we would a normal React component. So how can I invoke a React component?
Start typing.
Yeah.
In the angle bracket.
Yep.
Monster, and then the closing one, and then it will auto import it.
Yeah, if I press tab as I'm typing, and then it auto imported it on line 1. And there we go. We have our first, I think that we have ever made React component separate from our app component. We have a monsters component, but they're both React components, same thing. And okay, right now it's saying monsters, but our objective is to see a button. So I want a button that says make a monster. What do you think, Kimberly?
I just have to pull it on just right now. So
I'm not sure, Max.
Okay. Roman, what do you think? How can I get a button that says make a monster?
You could do button
Yeah.
element. Make a monster inside of it.
Then we can get rid of this. And okay. When I click make a monster, obviously nothing happens. Eventually I'm going to make a monster, but that's way in the future. For right now, when I click it, I just want to see a message in the console. I'm going to make a monster. What do you think, Victor? When I click this button, how can I get a function to fire that outputs to the console? We're going to make a monster.
Wouldn't you have to give the button an ID to be able to?
In old JavaScript, yeah, in vanilla JavaScript. But in React, how do we wire this up to an event listener to listen to a click? I want this button element to listen for a click. This is the one way it's like easier in React, in my opinion, than.
Is it on click?
Yeah. So we just type on click, and then what's the data type of the argument that on click takes, Ryan?
A callback function.
A callback function. Very nice. We've always done it inline, and this is anonymous, right? But nothing stops us from saying, defining this outside of this line and saying like handle generate monster. And then I can create a function here called handle generate monster. And then if I console.log going to make a monster, this should all work, right? So there we go. Going to make a monster. This is a nice option when you have a few lines of code, which I'm predicting we're going to have, because it can get kind of messy if you write it all in here, as opposed to naming a function and then defining the code here. But they're equivalent. Any questions on that? The two options you have? Inline with an anonymous function. Technically, I guess you could name it as well, but traditionally anonymous. Or you can name a function and create it right above. Okay, so we don't want to just say we're going to make a monster. I want to make a monster. I want to make a monster. That's an object with the properties of ID, name, emoji. What do you think, Monica? How can I make a monster object with those properties?
You do an array of objects?
Not yet. We're just trying to generate one monster, but we absolutely will do that later. How can I make a single object?
You just create an array?
Not an array, no. I just want to make one object right now to represent a monster. Aaron, any ideas?
Would it be a const?
Yeah. What's a good name for our monster?
The monster?
Yes. And what symbol do we use to make an object literal?
Drawing a blank. On click?
I'll give you two options. Square brackets or curly braces?
Square brackets.
Nope. Curly braces.
Shit.
Okay, so now we need the properties I described. What do you think, Ketzerin? How can I get ID, name, emoji to represent this new monster we're creating?
Course. First is put the course and put the name.
What's a good monster name?
Pokemon.
Pokemon? Okay. Sure. Some of them are, I guess, kind of scary. And then emoji, who wants, oh, we can use our new trick, right? Let's see if I can do this without looking down. I can't. I never use the window button. Rodrigo, what's your favorite monster?
Frog.
A frog? What is going on today? What do you? I don't understand your guys' concept of monsters, but that's okay. Frogs, I guess, are scary. Okay, we have this monster represented in code as an object. Now, how can I save this monster to state, right? So now I need a place to store these monsters in my app. Who has a good idea for how we can store a collection of our monsters in this app?
Use state.
Yeah. So we're going to do use state. And what is its value initially?
Empty string.
So if I want to store a bunch of monster objects, is a string the best way to do that?
An empty array.
Yeah, we're going to do an empty array. And I got to auto import use state because I didn't create that function. And then what's a good name for my array of monsters? Jazz.
Monsters array.
Sure, we'll do monsters. And then what's the second variable here called?
Monsters.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, if I console.log monster and I console.log monsters, what will we see in our console, Hara, when I click make a monster?
The monster would show the frog or Pokemon, I guess. Like that first.
Yeah, it'll show the whole first object.
Yeah, the first
and then
ID.
what will the second be? What is monsters?
Probably this. Sorry?
What is the value of monsters initially?
Nothing.
It's not nothing.
Wait. Sorry, I'm just trying to follow. Oh, the first object.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Not sure.
Yeah. So Renata, what is the value of monsters initially?
Empty array.
Yeah. So the argument here for use state is what this value is initially. Yep. So we're going to see the object in an empty array when I click make a monster. Now the whole idea is what? We want our monster to be added to this monster's array, the place and state we stored. How can we do that? And I think we've seen this exact idea before, but it's a little tricky. There's the fancy way, the React way, and then a fewer lines of code way, right? But I'll take anything. Does anyone have any idea how we can get this new monster object into our monsters array state?
I think you said you have to copy it into a new array and, and recopy it again.
Kind of, yeah. So we will have to make a copy of what?
Of monsters.
Yeah. So we can do that. Monsters copy. And how could I do that, David?
With the ... The spread operator, I think it's called.
Absolutely, yeah. But what goes around the spread operator?
Brackets.
Yep. And then what are we spreading?
The monsters.
Very nice. Yeah. And I did that wrong. I put it after, it goes before. And now as a sanity check, we can console.log monsters copy. And what will we see here? Kevin?
The ID name and
No, not yet. It's just going to be an empty array. But our goal is eventually to add it. Yeah. So we successfully added anything that was in monsters, but nothing was in monsters. How can we add the new monster?
Comma monster.
Yeah. Maybe a better word for this is updated monsters. And now if I console.log updated monsters, what will I see? Gyung?
You can see a array of the first object.
Exactly. So this
So,
spread
yeah.
operator is kind of doing nothing. And then this one is putting in the new monster. So I click make a monster and I see an array of one object. So I'm happy. And now I can do what? How can I get my state updated? My monster's state.
Use the set monster.
Yeah, set monsters to...
This. What is it? Update monsters.
Yep, exactly. And now if I console.log monsters, I'll see an empty array at first. And then when I click make a monster, what will I see, David? So monsters is initially an empty array, but when I click make a monster, this is going to run again. And what will we see in our monsters state array?
you're going to see the new monster that was added.
Very nice. And now the tricky question, what if I click it again?
Will you see it again?
We'll see something again, but not the same thing. So this line of code all this code will run again.
It would be empty again.
No, it won't be empty again because it's taking all the old monsters right here and spreading them. And now monsters contains one object.
So it'll be 2, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. So now we have 2 of what objects, though? Copies of the same thing. Because we're just running this code again. And if I click it a third time, 3. Which is fine for right now. So any questions on that, though?
Would you be able to explain the spreader method there, what it's doing exactly?
Yeah, so let's get away from this complicated code and just write this one more time, right? So here's the idea of spreader. We want to make a copy of the array. So we can say what? Zach, how can we make a copy of that array using the spread operator?
I'm not sure.
So we do the triple dots, which is just the spread operator, and then the name of the array we want to take everything out of. And now if I console.log copy, what will I see?
I assume everything in the original.
Yeah. Yeah. So there we go. So that's all the spread operator is doing, taking everything out and putting it somewhere new.
All right. Okay. I understand now. Thank you.
And then the comma after it would
would just insert the element that we want to put in the array.
Oh, exactly. So what if I not only want to make a copy of this array, but I want to add Daniel, right? That's what we're doing here. We want to make a copy of the array and add Daniel. Now when I console.log it, what will we see? How many names? 4. Yep. Okay, so returning our attention to this, I think it's actually simpler to just, I'm going to clean it up just a bit, in my opinion, and just do this. I don't know if that's worse or better for you guys, but that's the same code, right?
Max.
Yeah.
Not understanding why we needed like a copy of the empty.
Yeah, because it won't be empty in the future. Right now it's empty, but we can imagine that we already had a monster in here, right?
Oh, okay.
I don't know, frog boy. So we don't want to get rid of frog boy. We want to keep them when we add the new one. So we need all the old ones.
Okay.
Sorry, Max, what did you, I just missed that moment when you said, what happens when you double click on the make a monster button?
Okay, so let's console.log monsters again. And I'll ask you, what do we see when I just save this application? What am I going to see actually for my monsters? Console.log.
It should just be an array with the object in it.
Very nice. Yeah. And that's what we see.
Okay.
Hold on. What is going on? There we go. I had to refresh. And let me get rid of this code. So it's an array of the one object we put in there manually, frog boy. Now, when I click make a monster, take us through, Renata, and what do you think this line of code is going to do?
Because that line of code is changing the state.
It's going to change the state. Yep.
Yeah. And it's taking that copy.
So it's taking the old monsters and spreading it. So what's in the old monsters currently?
In the old monsters is the object now.
The one object frog boy. So we're going to get that.
Yeah.
And then we're also getting monster.
Yes.
So what will we see when I click make a monster?
You're going to see 2 objects of the same thing. Maybe.
Why same thing? This one's frog boy. This new one is Pokemon.
Oh, I didn't pay attention. It was a new one. Sorry. I thought it was the same. It looked the same to me.
It does,
okay,
yeah.
So because it has the same emoji. Yeah. So then you'll have 2 objects now.
Yeah.
In there, the frog boy and the Pokemon.
And that's exactly right. But then, do you have a guess if we click again? It's a little trickier.
It's gonna duplicate it, and then you have
Duplicate which ones?
both of them, both of the objects. I would assume, or because it's reading it over.
So how many items will be in our array?
And it's copying it 4.
I don't think so. I think we'll
Would
get.
it only be 3?
Because what is monsters? What is the old monsters right now in our application?
Oh.
We have two monsters, and then we're making a new one that's a duplicate. So I think we'll have a total of 3. Yeah. Frog boy and 2 Pokemons. Okay. So let's switch gear just a little bit. I want to display these monsters.
I have a question.
Sure.
Just to clarify, we're only making a copy whenever it's an array that is a state, right? Like if it was a number or a string inside of the use state, um, we could change it directly, or do we also have to make a copy in that case and set it to the new state?
We're doing this fancy spreading because if we were just doing normal JavaScript, how could we add something to an array?
Just push, right?
Yeah, but we can't do that anymore because that's violating the laws of React. So we have to do this weird syntax to make a copy before we add something new. So we're manipulating this new array, which we don't care about because it's not state yet, even though it becomes state later. But as far as no, if we had some kind of counter here and set counter, and we started that at the number 0, same laws apply. We can't say counter equals 1 because that would be manipulating state directly. We still have to say set counter. It doesn't matter that the data type is different.
Yeah, but I meant like in this case, so the counter example, we don't have to create a copy of your counter and then set it to the copy, right? We could just set counter and then just put the number in directly, right? Because it's not an array.
Yeah, but same thing here. We're just
making an array and then
so set count, okay. We're just making a new number, and set monsters, we're just making a new array. So it's fundamentally the same idea. It just looks more complicated, of course.
Yeah, it looked a little more complicated, but yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so I want to display the monsters. I just want their name. For right now, let's just try to get their name right on the screen. So, yeah. How can I iterate through my array of monsters and display them, each one of their names? And this is a refresh from yesterday.
You do a div and then the curly brackets and then pet.name.
Curly braces, yep. Pet. So not pet.
Monster.
Not monster. Monster's not defined.
Yeah. Monsters.name.
Monsters dot what?
Name, right? Because you want the name of them?
Okay, so monsters is an array. Arrays don't have properties, so we can't use dot notation. I mean, they do have properties, but that's a different story. They're not an object, so we can't access monsters.name is undefined. Monsters is an array with one object in it.
Is it monsters.map?
Yeah, so we want to iterate through all of our monsters items and return a new array. And then what data type does map take as its argument?
Item.
Callback function.
Callback function, yeah. And then here we can return, for each item, we can return whatever we want in the new array. So if here I do a little div and I say hi, how many highs will I see right now in our code when I press save? Alex, any guess? How many highs will we see? How much work does map have to do to iterate through that array?
Is it just going to be the one?
Yep, you got it. I got to refresh, I think, because we had the old ones. Yeah. So just the one, because we by default only have Froggy Boy in our array. Now, when I click make a monster, how many will we see? Highs, Daniel.
Two.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, so on and so on. We're getting an error though in our. Well, I'll deal with that in a second. So we don't want to see. We don't want to see what? We wanted to see our monster's name. We don't want to see hi. We want to see our monster's name. So how can I modify this code to access the monster's name for each monster? Sarthak? Sarthak?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. What do you think, Ronald? How can I see each monster's name?
You would need to access some property on the object. So we need to give the callback function a parameter, like element or monster, I guess.
Beautifully said.
Singular.
Yeah. Perfect name. And now that we have the named parameter, how can I access each of their names?
Yeah, we can use like dot notation to access the property name.
Sure.
On the monster. So monster. We need to give to use an expression, we need to put it in curly braces.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Monster dot name.
Yeah. And there we go. Now, okay, let me pause there though. This is going to be a pattern we see just again and again and again. So really try to absorb it. You're not going to have a choice. It's just how we do it in React. But let me pause there. What questions do you have on this so far?
I have one question.
Yeah.
If we like decreate the object different file and then we like import, how we can be like?
We're going to do that in this lecture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, how do we target a specific
object in an array?
Yes.
We're also
right,
going to do that. Yeah, in a little bit. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to make a few monsters, right? And what do I see that I don't love about this app? There's a few things. I have a warning here in my console. I don't like warnings. I like a clean console. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So what do I have to do to make React happy in this map method?
You have to add an ID.
Yes, but more specifically,
of the like objects in the array.
Yeah, that's also true. But what's the property called? It says I need to add a unique key prop. Yeah, so we have to give the topmost element. Yeah, go ahead.
Monster.id.
Perfect. Except now we have another warning, and this one's more interesting. And you guys will have to tell me why. Actually, at first, we're not going to have the warning when the app first starts.
Forgot to change the ID.
Yeah.
For one of them to 2.
Yeah. So now it says 2 children have the same key. So defeating the whole purpose of the key should be unique. So does anyone have a solution? Instead of hard coding the number 1, can anyone brainstorm a solution to basically make that 2 in the next iteration, 3, 4, 5?
Create a counter somewhere.
That's too much work. We can do it easier. But that would probably work.
Empty bracket.
Empty brackets?
Would you have to add like a +1 somewhere in there? But I don't know how.
Yeah, maybe.
Syntax would look.
So monsters is an array of monsters. If we have 50 monsters, how can we calculate the number 50?
Just count the length of the array.
Yeah, there we go. So monsters dot what?
Length.
Yeah. So monsters dot length right now is equal to 1 when I first start this code. So we don't want it to be ID 1 because Frogboy is already ID 1. So what should we do to it?
+1?
Yeah. Very nice. So now, look at that. No warnings in our console, which I really like. But really boring app, right? First off, we should see their pictures, their emojis. So let's do that. How can I get each of their emojis to show up below their name? Kimberly?
to the curly brackets and then put pet dot emoji.
Yeah, monster dot emoji. Yeah, but I should include this in a element, so I'll just put it in a div. So that's nice, but also this app is super boring, right? We just have this monster Pokemon that's a frog. So we can have way more fun with this, right? And this will get into the question one of you guys just had a second ago. We're going to use ChatGPT to generate an array of 50 monster names. I'm going to create a new place to store these in, because if I stored these all in this component, it'd be like, I mean, I could, I guess. It's not a huge deal, but I want to show you anyway how I would probably do this. So I would create a new folder called library. The naming of it doesn't really matter that much. And I'm going to create an index.js file. I'm using JS because I know I'm thinking ahead and I'm not going to actually use React. This is just JavaScript. I'm going to copy this big old monster names and paste it into here. But now the thing is, I want access to this array in here. Specifically, actually, in here is where I really... So I want to be able to console.log the monster's names. How can I do that, do we think? Because right now, if I try to do that, what will we see? Monster names. So will this work automatically? Because I created it here in this module, and now I want to use it here. Is that a problem or not, Roman? Will this line work?
No.
No. So what do we have to... So it says uncaught reference error, monster names is not defined. So what do we have to do? What work do we have to do to be able to use this?
You would have to import.
We have to import it, but first I'm going to export it. So how do I export this?
Export.
Yep, just put the word export. And now importing is super easy because I can use our tricks, right? I can just press tab when I'm typing it and it auto imports it at the top. And now I can actually have access to those monster names. And now we're in a position where we can have some fun. Instead of getting Pokemon, I want a random name from monsters' names. How can I do that? How can I get a random name from my monsters' names?
Could you do... I was going to say .random or something, but I don't think so anymore.
That'd be cool if .random existed. I don't think it does.
Could you do like a math random? And
we will use math.random. First, if I just wanted the first item from monster names, how would I do that? How would I just get the first item?
Get by ID.
Monster names is what data type, first off?
It's an array.
It's an array. How can we access the first item of an array?
With the square brackets and a 0.
Yeah, so what do I type, Zach?
Monster names.
Square bracket.
I'm not sure if it be, yeah, square bracket 0.
Okay, so now when we generate monsters, we're getting Grimlock every time. Okay, that's not fun either. Instead of the 0, what can we do?
Math random comes in.
Yeah, this is where math.random. So we'll start there and say math.random. Math.random gives us a random number between 0 and 1, but we want to multiply that by what?
50.
Monster length.
Monster names.length. Yeah, perfect. And now we're getting a number like 3.5 though. So what do we want to do to this?
Math.seal.
Floor, because we start counting at 0. or seal if you, and then you can -1, I guess. And now I think we're actually good. Yeah, there we go. So we have all these cool names, right? Same story for emojis. Or actually, before we even do that, how can I make this? I want this way bigger. It's not scary looking, right? I want my emoji way bigger. How can I do that, Victor? How can I get this emoji to appear bigger?
You can give it an ID.
Sure. What's a good name?
Frog.
Frog is not a good name. Why not? They're not all going to be frogs in the future.
Icon?
Yeah, I'm just going to call it monster emoji, but yeah, icon would also work. Now to target it, that I called it monster emoji, how can we target it in CSS?
Hashtag monster icon.
Yeah, I called it emoji.
Emoji, yeah.
And then to make it bigger, what CSS property?
Font size.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, 50px.
Okay. What was I doing? Oh, so this is boring, right? That they all look the same. So same story. I want to generate a JavaScript array of 50 monster emojis. I'm going to copy this. This actually looks better than when I did it before. Okay. I want to use monster emojis as my monsters component. How can I make it available to anyone who might want it, Ryan?
You need to export it with the word export.
Yep. And then in my monsters component, I want to now access it. How can I access it?
You can use autofill and then it'll auto import it.
Yep. So I press tab and it auto imported it up here. Now I have access to it. Now I'm going to copy this code and then Ryan's going to tell me what needs to change because it's the same functionality. But what needs to change, Ryan?
You need to change the name to whatever you called it. I forgot.
Yeah, monster emojis and monster emojis dot length. Whoa. What did I do? What did I do here? Let me start over because I'm confused now. Monster emojis. Monster. Okay. All right. So Frog Boy because he's default. But now that we're done making this app, we don't really need the default anymore. So now we can just make a monster, Hellfire, Storm Scale, Blazewing. So this is pretty cool, right? We have this random monster we're making. And they're all being stored in our array of monsters. So let me pause there for questions.
What's the difference between export and export default?
One's called a named export. One's called the default export. How you bring them in when you import them is different. So if you have multiple things, like I knew we would in this library, that's why you're going to use export. But if you only had one thing you wanted to export, for example, let's export default monster emojis. And I get rid of the export here. Now when I bring it in, I don't use the curly braces. The main difference is if you use default export, when you're importing it, you can name it anything you want. If you use a named export, then you can use the curly braces and you have to use the original name. But now I can call this anything I want and it'll still work. but I'm going to set it back to the named.
Do you know why it like does that? Is it because like it only has one default export, so it automatically just assumes like, hey, this is what you're getting?
Well, yeah, because if you tried to default export two things and then you tried to import it and you're not using the same name, it has no way of knowing which you mean.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's why it's
It'd be
only one default.
yeah.
You can name it.
So you can only do one default export.
So in this
for your
example,
oh shoot, why did this not save right?
Can you still rename the other ones though, right? The named.
Oh, I
exports?
think you can, like as, which I never use.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you can rename it anyway. I never use that feature though, but it is there.
For your library, in
Yes.
your library, I mean, could you have just created one, like could you have combined the name and the emoji, or like
Absolutely.
is separating them
You can
better?
do whatever you want.
Okay.
You could do
And
that.
then also with the index.js, you can also do
Index.js.
like just the labeling of the library. You can also do index.jsx or
You could, but it'd be misleading because there's nothing to do with the React in this file.
oh, okay.
Yeah, we're not using anything that looks like that.
Okay.
Okay, so we generated a monster, a random one. I know you guys were very excited to generate a random pet, so you can use this exact strategy. Now let's talk about some of these are kind of lame, right? Like a rhinoceros is not a monster. So I want to click and delete some of them. I want to be able to click and delete some of them, or any of them actually. Any ideas how I could do that? How I can do that functionality?
Like delete random ones? Is that what you're talking about, or delete specific?
Not random. When I click on one of them, I want to delete it.
Would it be similar to like I can't remember which one it was, the hover on one of the previous assignments?
We're not going to use hover now.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we could, but we're not going to. Let's start smaller. When I click, I want a function to fire that says you clicked. A monster. Go ahead.
An on click on that monster.
Which line goes the on click? You're right. We're going to use on click.
Emoji.
I think it's the whole, oh, yeah, it would be the emoji because that's what you.
It doesn't have to be. Here's where you as the developer can decide. Do you want your user to have to click on the emoji or the whole box
I was
containing?
thinking the whole thing initially. Like
I was thinking that too, but this is just a user. This is an opinion. It's not. There's no right answer here. But let's do it here. The on click. What's a good name for the function we haven't written yet, but eventually we're gonna write?
Handle click delete.
Perfect. Yeah. Handle delete monster. And now how can I define this function? Handle delete monster. Monica?
What are we trying to do?
Define a function called handle delete monster.
Oh, so just create a function, handle delete monster.
And then I want it to console.log deleting monster. And now when I when I make some monsters and click, that works, deleting monster. But we have way more work to do, right? How do we actually delete the monster? What does that even mean, deleting a monster?
Delete the div.
No, definitely not deleting the div. The div is just our view for all the monsters.
Sorry, I meant like the div with a specific div, not the whole one.
Well, no, we're never actually going to delete the div ourselves, right? It's gonna React is gonna do that for us when we update our state.
Wouldn't it be forcing it to generate a new monster in place of the one we clicked on?
Not a new monster. We're not replacing it. We're just getting rid of it. So
Okay.
monsters array, our state right now, has death spike, the object. When I click on it, what do I want to happen to this object in our array of state?
Delete.
I want it to be removed somehow. So that's our objective.
You have to
remove the object from state somehow.
Filter?
Yeah, we can use filter. Filter would be a great option. But what are we filtering?
Through the array or, yeah.
Yeah, which
like
array
to pick
though?
a specific. Sorry, I forgot which one you were trying to delete.
Oh, it doesn't matter which one. We want to be able to click on any of them and delete them.
The monsters array?
Maybe we'll start here. How do I know which I clicked on? When I'm in this little function here, this handler, how do I know which I clicked on?
By the ID?
I need the ID. How do I get the ID?
Use filter to check is the not equal ID.
Eventually, yeah, that will be code we write. But right now, I want to work on getting the ID. I want to console.log the ID of the monster right here. Deleting monster ID is what? How do I get that information?
You pass as an argument?
Yeah, I'm going to have to modify this line. So how do I pass the argument, David?
You would just do handle delete monster and then create your own variable in there, right?
I think like we create a callback function at the beginning.
We do. Yeah, but just to finish the thought, here we have access to monster. So which property do I want from monster?
Monsters.id.
I want the ID. But the problem with this is immediately invoking it. And the onClick accepts a callback function. So we have to turn this into an anonymous function. And now, what should we call this parameter here? What's a good name? What's the input for this function now that we're passing the monster's ID?
ID.
Yeah, I'm just going to say monster ID, but ID is totally fine. So now all that work, if I do monster ID and I click on death spike, what will we see? Aaron, what do you think we'll see for death spike when I click on him? This is a little bit hard, but
I don't know. I'm stunned.
1.
Yeah, I think we'll see 1. And then 2, 3, 4. Because of this code right here. So we got the ID. We're in a good place. Now we need to make a copy of monsters and filter out that object with that monster ID. That's kind of the objective, right? And there's a built-in array method specifically for this purpose called filter. So how can we use filter to do this, to filter it out.
Would you need to create a new variable, like to see which one you're targeting?
You
like
could.
const.
Well, we already have monster ID, so we know it's ID.
Can you do monster ID dot filter?
So filter is an array method, so we have to start with the name of the array. What's our array named?
Monsters.
Monsters. And then we say dot filter. And just like map, what argument does it take?
Callback.
A callback function. This one's very different. It doesn't return whatever you put here. It only keeps it if it's true and gets rid of it if it's false. So here, if I console.log this is tricky, right? What will we see?
Undefined.
Well, this is tricky, but right now the state of our app is 4 items, so we'll see all 4 items. Because for each item, it's just evaluating to true, so it's keeping it in the new array. And then if I say false here, and we have 4 items currently in our monsters array, what will we see in this console.log?
Empty array.
Correct. We'll see an empty array. Oh, I didn't click. Oh, I have to click on one to run this function. Yeah. Okay, so that's how filter works, right? Should we break that down a little separate, maybe? So filter, array method built in that makes a copy of an array and then decides which items from the original array to keep based on your callback function, resolving to true or false. So we have an array here called numbers. I only want the numbers to show up that are greater than 10. How can I use filter to get a copy of this array and then only have the numbers show up that are greater than 10?
We create a new one like house number equal nums dot filter, and you can put number.
So what data type is the argument?
Callback function.
Callback function. What's a good name for the item?
Numbers.
Not numbers, one at a time. So like num or number.
Nums equal. Num. What you got? What do you need again?
I think I said I want greater than all the numbers greater than 10.
Greater 10.
Yeah, and then what will we see in the console?
A new array with all the numbers greater than 10.
Yeah, so how many items?
3.
Yeah, exactly. So unlike map, it doesn't necessarily return the same number of items. It almost never does, or why are you using filter, right? Like its name implies you want to filter stuff out. And then let me try to trick you guys, right? What will we see now?
Nothing.
Not nothing, but what?
Empty array.
Yeah, exactly.
0. Oh.
And let's get really annoying. What will we see now?
First item.
Anything other than 0?
Not a 0, no.
We'll see. Is it 134, 4544, 23? Maybe.
So, is 0 a Boolean?
No.
No.
Is 0 truthy or falsy?
Falsy.
So, it'll be converted to false, and then we'll see an empty array.
Max, I always got I always got confused when I would always say it to people. I know that filter the I guess conditional thing that's getting called every time. Whenever it's true, it kind of filters in or adds that to the array.
Yes.
And I always got confused because it's like it's filtering it out, but then it only when it's true it brings those in, but when it's false, it's like it doesn't bring it in. And I always felt like it was like the opposite of like in my mind always.
Filter just cares if this evaluates to true or false. Doesn't care about anything else, unlike map, right? Doesn't matter to it at all. So
Sorry,
what will
why
this
was
be?
0 false?
What?
Why was it when you had 0 it was false?
Because we have 0 is falsy, so it gets converted to a Boolean. So what will we see here, Renato? Renato.
The same, I guess, false because
Is the string
no,
high,
sorry, this is a
truthy, or
string.
falsy?
Sorry, so it goes by the type. So that would be true then.
So we'll see in our console.
So
Would it
if
be
it's
just-
true, the array with numbers, I don't know. I'm confused. So
For each item, it applies this callback, and it says, I'm either going to keep it or throw it away based on if it's true or false. For each one, the value is high, and that value is true. So for each one, it keeps it. So we have an array with all those numbers.
okay, I was right. I wasn't confident.
Yeah. And then final one. What do you think, Renato? I'll pick on you.
No. I can't remember if it's falsy.
It's falsy.
It said falsy. So then nothing. It would be an empty array.
Perfect. Yeah.
I understand now. Thank you.
But we'll put this back to num greater than 10 because that makes more sense. That is filter. Now to come back. Yeah.
Sorry, Max. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Like I understand 0's falsy, but let's say for some reason you wanted to check or filter for that 0. Would you have to explicitly write num greater less than 1 or something like that for it to work?
I mean, you could do this because
equal to 0. Okay.
Because you tell me, what will we see now? What's the one number that this is true for, this condition?
The 0.
So we'll see what in our console?
An array with the 0?
Yeah, and nothing else. So you can put whatever condition you want here. The sky is the limit.
Okay.
We can even keep that. That's fine.
So your condition determines what filter is putting into the new array, not what it's filtering out, right? So like in this case, if you wanted num equal 23, it is only gonna take the 23, not the opposite, right? Where it filters out 23.
For each item, this function is firing, and if it's true, whatever you put, it keeps it. And if it's false, it doesn't keep it.
And it puts it in a new array?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why we're using it, because it's non-mutating. If I console.log nums, it's untouched. So now, how do we apply filter to filter our monsters array to have all the original items, monsters, except the one monster with this monster ID? What condition do I put here?
Not equal.
Yes. Monster dot what?
does monster ID.
Monster.id is not equal to what? Monster ID. Yeah. And now I'm going to make some monsters. I click on one. And now we see an array of everything except... Did I click on Darkfang?
Yeah, but you have two monsters called Darkfang. So.
Oh, whoops. That was unlucky. Okay. So there, we don't want to see shadow spawn in this new array, and we don't. Yeah. So now instead of console.logging it, how do I set this to be my new state?
We create a new one, cow's name. I'm
just going to do set monsters. Although you absolutely could just put this in a new variable. It'd probably be cleaner. And finally, I can make monsters and I can delete them. So a zebra is not a monster, right? Nor a gorilla. Nor a dinosaur, I guess. Or a deer. All right. I'll give you this code. It's going to take a little bit of time to absorb it, right? But we're over time for lecture. But are there any final questions?
No, thank you. It really helps.
Yeah, yeah.
Really
And this
helped
is
me.
going to be a similar feeling to updating. It's going to be very similar. So if you understand this, you'll probably be able to understand updating. Updating is maybe a little bit harder, but fundamentally it's the same.
So I'm sorry to backtrack on this, but just because I wanted to make it clear, I noticed that in your generate monsters and in your handle delete monsters, we didn't create a copy and then set the copy. We just directly applied the filter to set monsters method. And
here,
the same thing, like we did, we deconstructed it in monsters and then monster and set monsters. How come you didn't, like, what's the best way of doing it? Would we usually create a copy and then set monster a copy? Or like
monsters.filter is making a copy for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's
so
doing
it's just
the
shorthand. It's just a shorthand way of doing what we kind of did before. Then.
Yeah, filter is doing the work of making the copy. So we don't. That's why we don't need the spread operator here. There certainly could be a version where you do that first, but you don't need to because of filter. Filter feels like it's mutating the original array, but it's not. It's creating a whole new separate array. So yeah, and then of course we're now updating our state with that new array, but yeah.
Is line 21 not being read?
Line 21 is being read, yeah. This is how we're generating a monster. So two different activities, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So making a monster is working for us.
Max, when do we need to worry about, I know that these array methods create copies of the array, but they're only shallow copies. I forgot at what point do we need to work. Later on in the course, are we going to be worrying about shallow copy versus non-shallow copies? It's only copying the outer array, not the objects inside each array, right?
Copy?
Like, no, I mean, like, so the insides of the objects aren't like being new objects. It's the same original objects inside the array. It's creating a new, like, container for those objects.
I would avoid nested arrays or nested objects just because of that. I don't remember if spread.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But you have to like actually go inside that object and then spread that object to create a new object of that object.
Yeah, yeah. So you know more about spread for nested objects than me. I haven't run into that yet in an application. So yeah. So when you hit that case, that's something you would just have to explore. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
Nor do I want to guess because I really just don't know. But in this course, we're not gonna. There's really no situation where you're gonna have a nested object that I can think of.
Or in the day-to-day as well, like not too much, right?
Yeah, just because it gets so messy, right? Although, I mean, next week you're gonna be dealing with some nested objects, but when you make fetch requests to servers, but you're not going to be making copies of them. So yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Max, one minor question I was just curious about was just in terms of props, because I know we didn't, or sorry, not props, components.
Yeah.
So my friend right now, she's more senior than I, and she's kind of doing an apprenticeship. And she told me that in her apprenticeship, they were saying how like you should make a component for everything it feels, like for every function that you can make reusable. So I don't know, but because we have everything here in this monsters, but I know it's for example, but I don't know. Are there things like we could put into different components that you would suggest?
Yeah. Who sees an opportunity, especially David's group, for making some code on the screen its own component?
Max, could you do like a separate component for like a the monster button?
Right
and then
here.
A separate component.
Oh, the button is too small to really care about.
Okay.
But certainly the view that you're mapping through, this could be like monster card. This could be its own component for sure. I feel like when you're first learning React, I think if you start making too many, it gets harder to follow as opposed to easier. But in real production React, this would probably be its own component. And if something gets like 10 or more lines, just make it its own component, right? Because that's a good rule. Like if it just starts getting too long, that's what these components are for. It's because we don't want to click on a file that's 1,000 lines of code. It's just unreadable for us humans. That's the whole point. The computer doesn't care. It could be the 2 billion lines of code could all be in one file as far as, the computer is concerned. But for our readability, there's a limit when it becomes just too much.
Max, I have like one question.
Sure. But this is the last one. But go ahead.
Okay. You brought up like monster card.
Yeah.
What's the difference between just creating like a generic card versus monster card? And if you're saying monster card, are we supposed to create a card like component and then extend that card component from that to the monster card? Is that what you're saying, or just saying calling it monster card?
No, I'm just calling it monster card because our application is building monsters.
Okay.
So I'm picturing that each of these monster cards would be nicely styled, and box shadows, and it would, there would be a lot. I think this would be a lot of code if you're building this out for real. So that would be a nice place to use a component in my opinion.
Thank you.
All right, let's get the breakout rooms going.
Hey, Matt, are you taking any more questions, or was that the last one?
Okay, what do you got?
Yeah, when building the component, you use the word props. Is that convention for every single component you build as an argument to your component?
So props is something automatic that every component receives, but we have to tell it which values we want to pass to it. And that's something we'll explore more next week. We haven't really had a good opportunity. Well, your group has. We passed props with your group. But it just hasn't organically come up in lecture, and I don't like to force things. I like them to have a reason to come up. So hopefully next week there'll be this organic reason to explore. We've explored the hell out of state, right? But components can also pass their state to children, and that's called props. And we'll explore that next week. Okay, I'll see you in the rooms.